Effectively securing your organization and its reputation requires a smarter approach. To maximize efficiency and minimize risk, security experts turn to Logarithm, the only leading solution built solely for security teams by a security team committed to your success. With next-gen SIEM, user and entity behavior analytics, network traffic and behavior analysis, security automation and orchestration, and compliance, Logarithm provides security made smarter. Today's determined attackers easily bypass even the most advanced network defenses. Trying to ramp up staff to detect their backdoors can cost thousands of dollars and take months, even years. With Active Countermeasures AI Hunter, we enable junior analysts to detect even the most advanced backdoors in a matter of hours. Sign up for a demo and purchase our product today by visiting activecountermeasures.com/ESW. Active Countermeasures. Make every analyst a hunter. The greatest threat to businesses today isn't the outsider trying to get in. It's the people you trust, the ones who already have the keys, your employees, your contractors, and privileged users. 60% of online attacks are carried out by insiders. To stop these insider threats, you need to see what users are doing before an incident occurs. Observit combats insider threats by detecting risk activity, investigating in minutes, effectively responding, and stopping data lost. Give it a test drive at observit.com/securityweekly. Welcome back, everyone. I encourage you all to visit go.stealthbits.com/2019 trends. Register for StealthBits webcast that will feature myself and Rod. We're going to talk about the future of regulations, Active Directory, security, machine learning. It's going to be a great discussion. Rod Simmons and myself. You can also get a free assessment from StealthBits, stealthbits.com/assessment. Really, it's about knowing what you have and how sensitive your data is and who has access to it. Those fundamentals, some we talked about in the previous segment, understanding where your data lives and who has access to it and what constitutes sensitive data is important, and that'll be the focus of that webcast. So make sure you check it out. All right, John, we got a lot of stories to talk about. Ixia and ProtectWise, which, I mean, this is a logical partnership, and it sounds like they're extending their partnership. I mean, which just makes sense because Ixia is good at collecting the data. ProtectWise needs that full PCAP data to do its magic. Has a really cool interface. That's what I remember about ProtectWise, right, is seeing it at the various trade show booths and their interface being really cool. And giving you analytics on that traffic. So I think it's a good partnership. We talk a lot about the data that we get. Having that full PCAP is what I identify with ProtectWise. I don't know if that helps us enough to warrant that level of effort, right? I mean, because you need if you have, depending on your network, you probably need an Ixia or a Gigamon or something like that, right?
Which is fine. I mean, those are expensive products to go into. There's a new product for full packet capture at the edge for like setting up span ports that's competing with Gigamon. I can't remember where they are, but they're a lot more cost competitive.
Sure.
But there's two things about this. Number one, we were talking about it during the break. What happened to ProtectWise? I mean, they were absolutely everywhere. We saw them on trade shows. We saw their banners, and the interface looks amazing, and it's super cool. And then boom. Like they just didn't show up. I don't think that they had a representation at Black Hat. Maybe they did, but I didn't see as heavy of a marketing presence as I did earlier. So just curious what's happened. Maybe they pivoted. Maybe they've gone to different events, which is fine. I mean, that's not that big of a deal. And then I still question, if we're looking at full packet capture, it would be awesome if someone with ProtectWise would come on and kind of talk through this, because if you were looking at security, let's say 10 years ago, full packet capture was incredibly important. But when we're looking at data that's leaving an environment, a tremendous amount of it is actually encrypted. And are they actually doing SSL interception or TLS interception and then getting that full packet visibility? Or how are they actually working through the concept of encrypted channels? And that would be an interesting look at the product, because that full packet capture is really, really important for a large number of different organizations, specific market verticals, but actually capturing that, shoveling it off into the cloud can have some peculiarities, especially with sharding and trying to do replication of that
Sure.
data, like for like Amazon and things like that. So
Well,
it'd be
and
cool to get someone on from ProtectWise to kind of figure out what's happened, because I haven't seen much of them in a while.
it's interesting to talk about also active countermeasures in this light. It's a company that John and I founded, and some of the things that are happening there, and that's built on Bro. And then Corelight, did I get that right? It's Corelight,
Yep,
right?
Corelight.
Corelight is the commercial offering of Bro, which are making really super cool devices. And I know in speaking to the Corelight folks that they did some collaboration with Garland. Was it Garland Technologies you were referring to before? That also is competing now, with the Ixia and the Gigamons of the world. So if you're out there shopping, those are some of the names that John and I have been checking out as well. So
absolutely.
Ping Identity is bringing identity as a service. It's aimed at the developer community, offering an API based identity services for customer-facing applications. It can enable large enterprises to launch apps faster. That's what they say.
And I'm cool with this.
Sure.
I think that this is part of a trend that we've been seeing on the show, and actually in our tests as well, is the world is changing very, very rapidly. From my perspective as a penetration tester, a tremendous amount of focus has been done in research and development over the past 15 to 20 years on Active Directory, lateral movement, using PowerShell, tools like Bloodhound and PowerShell Empire, ShareFinder and things like that, to try to leverage that Active Directory environment. But what we're seeing is a lot more organizations are actually moving the concept of identity, your access control. And that's now shifting into the cloud. And it has to. If you're looking at most of the services that are coming out, you're going to see this become a more and more consistent theme that you're seeing on Enterprise Security Weekly. And I think Ping is in a great place for that kind of concept of integration of identity and authorization and access into various APIs for different services, and also extending the identity of who you are beyond that Active Directory infrastructure. So this seems like it just makes sense, and it's moving in the right direction.
CyberX has partnered with GE. I had not heard of CyberX before.
Me neither.
It sounds like they're trying to compete. I don't know if it's it is the ICS space. And this term industrial IoT, I've seen in the news more often. There must be a big push to get this out there. And I had not heard of CyberX. Of course, GE is strong in many areas of industrial, but also different kinds of IoT style devices. I know, like I said, my wife works in the medical field, and she likes the GE machines better than other machines as well. So, yeah, not sure there's much else there to talk about. Fortinet introduces some new security automation capabilities with Amazon Web Services. What I found interesting is you'll find a lot in the announcement they talk about a web application firewall. And I'm just curious to Fortinet, like what is that? Is it the kind of WAFs that work or the ones that don't? Because there's two different WAFs on the market today. If we break it down in its most simplistic form, there's the Signal Sciences form of what they're calling next generation WAF, which really isn't embracing any legacy WAF technologies. It's a totally new way to do it that actually works, right? And then there's the old WAF, which is like I'm applying regular expressions. And if you're using regular expressions, right, to solve a problem, now you have two problems, the original problem and regular expressions.
So my concern about this is it seems at least every other show, Fortinet is mentioned, right? And they've got new integration, they got new capabilities, new APIs, hooking in with different services, and that's fantastic. But anytime I'm seeing a company that does that in computer security, when you're looking at all the technologies that are at place, like you talk about web application firewall, what the hell does that actually mean?
Right.
It can mean so many different things. Whenever you start having a product that has been competing against Cisco for so long and ripping on Cisco for being this weird Frankenstein hodgepodge of technologies, it seems a lot like Fortinet is actually trying to replicate Cisco in this huge hodgepodge of technologies. And the reason why it concerns me is I love Fortinet. I love their product, especially for small to medium-sized businesses. I think they're fantastic. But the concern I have is at what point do you start focusing on what you do best?
Right.
And at what point are you wasting a tremendous amount of money chasing after buzzwords, and there's going to be very little customers to actually purchase that particular capability you're throwing in place?
Well, I mean, it's clear they're trying to move into the enterprise and trying to add all these features to compete on that enterprise play, right? But at what point do they dilute the solution set? Yeah.
Absolutely. And they absolutely can compete on the enterprise. We see a lot of enterprise customers that are running their products. But like I said, I have worry that it's a bunch of monkeys throwing poop on a wall and trying to watch what actually sticks.
eCentire has launched a new risk advisory and managed prevention services. It sounds like they can do MDR, managed detection and response,
Yeah.
but now they're kind of acting like consultants. It kind of sounds like what you might do in a lot of your maybe post penetration test, John, right? Is they're identifying blind spots in risk, assessing an organization's people, process, and technology, from on-premise to cloud, and building a strategy to define and plan, evaluates the current security program, maturity policies, architecture, and response capabilities, kind of under the umbrella of also managing some of your endpoint detection and response. It's kind
And
of
they're running
interesting.
Carbon Black under the hood.
And it's Carbon Black, correct.
Yep.
Yeah, it's managed detection response provider. So kind of interesting. I don't know.
I still
There's
think
a level of trust that needs to be there, right? And also a level of visibility. Kind of interesting. I don't know. I see it maybe more of a mid-market, small enterprise type of play, but again, they got to build up that trust that they can go in and identify blind spots and do that risk assessment.
Well, and there's just so much going on in the space. I mean, that's why it's kind of cool. You get Endgame on, right? And they're one of those vendors that we're pretty sure are going to make it at this point. They're definitely in that top 4 space whenever we're talking to customers and solutions that they're bringing up at IANS calls or post exploitation. Where do we go? They're definitely in that top 4. It just blows my mind how many different products there are, and then how many different MSSPs are actually riding on top of a lot of these products.
Yep.
I would really hate to be a CISO at this point and not really understand the space, because you'd be inundated with all kinds of crap at this point.
Yep. Yubico has an interesting announcement. In this one, I have to research more. Of course, we've talked about Azure Sphere in the past. It kind of sounds like a similar-ish framework for IoT that Yubico is now providing some type of technology that allows for some type of encryption and verification for managing all of your IoT devices that are in AWS IoT Greengrass. But again, it says the YubiHSM2 performs the crypto operations for Greengrass to use secure hardware, store keys. Greengrass allows users to securely and locally run compute, messaging, data caching, sync, and machine learning inference capabilities for connected devices.
Yeah, and the coolest thing about Greengrass, if you're researching it, is Greengrass allows you to invoke and run Lambda functions in Amazon.
Yes, I saw that. Cool. Yeah, so really hyper kind of cloud-connected IoT devices, which then, of course, you need some kind of verification of what's running on that IoT device in terms of both hardware, firmware, software, the whole thing, processes. So it sounds interesting. Also, I think it kind of highlights, when we think of Yubico, we think of more like end users have the Yubico keys. I think it's more of an enterprise play for Yubico, although I need to better understand their enterprise offerings. As in, I don't know if you see this, John, in when your clients have multi-factor authentication, and if it is a physical token, how they deal with it. Like, how do you deal with, well, how do we validate that the tokens our users have are ones that IT has blessed as, yes, that's an actual valid token for us? And then how do you deal with when someone loses their key, which is inevitable? Is there some kind of soft token or process? And what is that? And then how do you expire that old key from your system? And how does all that work, and how easy it is to manage and use?
Well, and just kind of bringing it back to a personal story, last week, I think the day that I was on the show a week ago, I lost my cell phone. And that doesn't seem like that's that big of a deal. I actually found it, and that's good. But I lost my cell phone, but it has my Google Authenticator, it has LastPass and text messages for authentication. And I was just screwed until I could find my phone and I could actually log back into things. And that's just a personal narrative of, we have all of these different authentication mechanisms that are coming up, like YubiKeys. And I think YubiKeys are great. But all of the questions that you just brought up are absolutely valid questions for anybody that's looking to invest in that technology. It's not just an issue of investing in the technology, but making sure you have the processes, the people, and the kind of infrastructure investment to handle all the problems that you just brought up.
Pulse Secure has expanded. Its zero trust is definitely a lot of messaging we're seeing from various vendors. Edgewise is a sponsor of the network, and it truly is. When you dig into it, I'm like, oh, now I get what you mean by zero trust. Others, I feel like, are just kind of using it as a buzz term, but they're talking about their combined VPN and NAC solution that provides corporate networks with zero trust through visibility to comply and connect. I mean, it sounds like traditional NAC, but with a whole bunch more buzzwords tied on top of it. Is that now that I think about that, that's probably
okay. And once again, we're trying to be better and like just not ripping on vendors, but this one just didn't give me a lot of information as far as what they were actually doing.
Yeah,
I'm sure it's buzzwords, cool, but we'll have to see.
I mean, they worked in next generation firewall, IoT, and micro-segmentation all in the same announcement. I mean, that's pretty impressive.
It's not bad. It's not bad at all.
Opaque Networks is named hottest cybersecurity startup of 2018. I'm trying to learn more about them. So they're a cloud security company. They have a platform as a service. It basically sounds like you've got your security
passage.
Yeah, it's a difficult. They all do. This to me sounds more like I got security stuff that I need to provide, and I can host it in the cloud with Opaque, and they take care of a lot of it for me rather than trying to piece it together in an Amazon, Google, or Azure cloud, perhaps. But they also SD-WAN, right? Basically point-to-point VPN connections for full encryption, all through a single interface. I think it's really interesting. It's
They're really
difficult
focused heavily on that channel marketing, which I think is a good play, especially for an organization.
Yeah, it definitely mentions if you're a service provider, right? You can take this and offer this as a service, is what it sounded like to me as well. An AI cybersecurity disruptor has launched a new platform. Now, I think the word disrupt is overused and overstated most often, but Sension will perform the heavy lifting. I don't know what that means either. When you write these things,
is Pollitt's sensory artificial intelligence.
Oh, so it has both the intelligence and context to separate benign activity from genuine threats. Really generic. It's able to carry out automated investigations with accuracy. You're saying stuff, but if you're truly disrupting, like, how are you doing it different from everyone else? We've been talking about separating benign activity from genuine threats for 20 years now. I mean, that's been the name of the game. How are you doing? I didn't get the differentiators out of this.
No, and we'll do a personal shout out to David Atkinson. So we just read this entire write-up. Once again, probably not the fault of any of the technical people at your organization, but these types of write-ups do absolutely nothing for an organization to try to get people to understand what your product does and why they should be purchasing your product. So look us up, hit us up on email, and we're always happy to work with new companies and kind of help refine the message as much as we possibly can.
And at the very least,
do a briefing. Doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, we're happy to do briefings. We got a team of people now doing briefings, so we can absolutely do that. And like you said, John, you're alluding to, we want to give everyone a fair shake and not base it on the stuff we read. I'm like, you could be doing something really cool, but I can't get to it from this announcement, right?
And how many times has that happened at shows? Like, we've ripped on a company because their marketing was an absolute complete train wreck. And then we get to like Black Hat, RSA, you're going down to InfoSec World or Secure World. I can't remember what conference is coming up here shortly. But you go to those and then their techs pull us aside and they're like, look, man, I know that our marketing was bad, but please just come and look at it because it's cool. We're like, that's really cool. The one thing I will say about Sension for everybody is they do have a free trial. And that usually is a very gutsy, awesome step. Yeah. So props to them for that. So check it out.
There you go. New Vector. Now, it's interesting. And I don't mean to rip on New Vector by any stretch. I mean, they could have the greatest technology in the world. It's another one I haven't really dug into. I've seen the name, the brand, the company, right? Identified them in the container security space. They've got a product announcement. I'm concerned for them, right? And in a lot of vendors in the space that this type of functionality I'm coming to expect that from the platform. So they say by integrating with Kubernetes via their Kubernetes API, New Vector can get notification for any image attempting to be deployed, then apply a policy, which an admin has configured, and decide whether to allow or block that deployment through Kubernetes. I'm like, why isn't this native functionality in Kubernetes, right? I mean, we talk about this at Microsoft all the time, but here it is in Kubernetes. Like, why isn't that's not native functionality? It could it be? I don't know. We have this line between the major platforms, right, and what they provide, and the things that are missing or have this opportunity for vendors to apply those features. But like, at what point do either they need to build it into the platform to begin with, or they acquire? I mean, Kubernetes is kind of a it's a kind of more of an open source thing. It's not an actual, not like Microsoft where they could acquire. But still, I read features like this and I'm like, that could very well be built into the platform, but it isn't. So.
Yeah,
I mean, props for New Vector for providing it, right?
There may be more to this, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's almost like an "Are you sure?" function.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're deploying an image, it's like, "Are you sure?" That's what we actually provide. At least the way that this actually reads. So
yeah. Oh, the feature totally makes sense. Like, if I'm using Kubernetes, I want this feature, right? Whether I get it from New Vector or it's built in. This is an absolutely, props to them, valid play in the market. I want to be able to apply policies to everything, every container that's going out, and make a decision as to whether I want to do that or not, allow or block. So I think it's a good feature. But this one sounded really cool. And I had to, once I read through all of the marketing speak, when I got to a certain point, I was like, oh, it's called ZeroStack, which kind of a play on words there. It's talking about AI as a service, which is very buzzworthy.
Self-driving cloud platform. You're like, oh dear God.
But then I get to it. They allow customers, it gives customers features to detect GPUs and make them available for users to run AI applications. In order to maximize utilization of this resource, cloud admins can configure, scale, and allow access control of GPU resources to end users. I was like, oh, that's cool. I like that. That's pretty awesome. Eclipsium is a startup. They raised $8.75 million, according to SecurityWeek.com. It's interesting. They seem to be targeting enterprises. Like, check the firmware on your laptops with some of the messaging. I'm kind of the opinion that when I buy my device, I want the firmware to be secure. I don't want to have to take on that responsibility of making sure the firmware in my printers and laptops and servers. We have they mentioned the Supermicro thing in here. I want to, and I know this isn't the reality today, right? But I want to reach a point where I just expect that whoever's providing me the hardware and firmware has done the due diligence to apply security to that firmware. Eclipsium is saying, well, if you've got this stuff already in your network, you can use our software to analyze it. And it could be awesome. Don't get me wrong. And there's been a few more startups that are analyzing firmware. I used to teach a class on analyzing firmware. I think it's absolutely something that needs to be done. I'm of the belief it should be on the device manufacturer, or even better, the person who's developing the firmware, to make sure that it's built into their processes so that when I get it, they've already run this tool, right?
Well, but let's take a step back. I mean, what is an organization that would look at this product and say, yes, this is absolutely a problem that I need to solve? Now, of course, Eclipsium is going to say, well, everybody. No,
that's wrong answer. No.
Right.
Let's hope they don't say that.
If you're an organization that is worried about firmware level attacks, you're definitely at a nation state level.
Sure.
You're definitely at an organization that is incredibly important intellectual property, and you would be targeted. And I do believe, without question, there are customers out there. But whenever I read quotes, it's like firmware, what does it say? It's like firmware attacks are pervasive, persistent, and have the ability to permeate and compromise entire data centers. That's true. But whenever you talk about pervasive, I don't see that attack. It's not like a weekly, monthly, or even semi-yearly occurrence. It's like, oh man, we got nailed by that latest firmware attack. It's just that doesn't come out all that often.
I mean, on the consumer side, it does. I mean, if you look at the firmware vulnerabilities that like the Mirai botnet took advantage of, on the consumer side,
yes,
huge problem. But different story when we're talking about enterprises, right? How many of those? I mean, if it is an attack that's pervasive, that's taking advantage of firmware, it's something that you probably could have discovered over the network. And it's like so glaringly obvious that you probably could have hit that, right?
Yeah, so I absolutely think that there is a space for this. I absolutely think that there are specific companies that would need this, but I would hope deep down that Eclipsium is charging a premium, because this is definitely a premium service.
Yeah,
for specific customers.
Where I like this service, and I've thought about this problem a lot, right? Because I used to teach a class on it. It'd be really cool that, like, if I have an enterprise, right, and I've got all these not even devices, right? There are IoT systems within your laptops and servers, as we mentioned. Every time it comes over the wire, it can identify it and then scan it as it's going in and give me an alert. Be like, yeah, this firmware that was just going on this laptop, that's got some pretty heinous vulnerabilities, right? Now, that doesn't help you if it's already installed on the system, but over the network, that could be pretty cool. Like if someone's downloading a backdoored version of a particular piece of firmware. But I would defer to your point on that, John, that this is an organization that has a security standard that they're worried about nation-state attacks, that to look at into security into this level. Agreed.
Yeah. And I guess the reason why I'm bringing it up, Paul, is I don't want some of the people that are listening to this show that have general organizations, the 80% of organizations saying, oh my God, I need to protect against firmware attacks. There are companies like that. Yep. Most likely yours is not one of them. Of course, what's going to happen is in the next 3 days, there's going to be some like firmware 0 day and malware spreading across it. And it's just going to be like, oh, crap.
Right. All righty. Well, that concludes this edition of Enterprise Security Weekly. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. We'll see you next time.